Hey, what's up? I'm Sean Dustin, and this is a Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. Uh, Today, actually, this is actually going to be a replay of a broadcast or of an interview I did earlier with Amy Povah from the founder of Can Do Justice Through Clemency. She helps currently incarcerated people get clemency and try to and help with getting out early and assisting with all of that. The reason why I'm doing it this way is we had a little bit of a mix-up and I had to go and do it through Zoom. So what I'm doing is just playing it back through screen sharing, and I'll be able to do all the stuff that I want to do. So I really want to run a promo for the con. So we're going to check that out right now.
Was never really comfortable with Addie Pope's situation. I looked through some contribution envelopes, some old contribution envelopes, and I found a couple of hers. And one of the things I noticed was she always used her middle initial. I went online and looked at the mortgage paperwork, and I noticed the signatures did not look the same. And in the mortgage document, she did not use her middle name. So I looked more, and she had called the sheriff's department, and she asked why was the sheriff continually coming to her door. Her house was paid for. Her husband paid for the house. It was paid for before his death. Why would a person call the sheriff's department to inquire why a deputy is at her door, serving her papers of eviction when her house is paid for? She believed, and I believe today, that that mortgage that was on her house was not originated by her.
So yeah, that was a trailer for the con. I was able to screen that great true crime documentary series that's coming out on the 7th in virtual theaters. You can catch it on you can catch the first episode for free August 5th at 8 p.m. Eastern Time at the Con Facebook page or the Real Progressives Facebook page. All of the relevant links will be in the comments for that. And also, one of the topics that Amy and I were talking about, I have a clip from President Clinton, which kind of backs up what I was saying. I went and found that. So we'll take a look at this.
But I want to say a few words about it, because I signed a bill that made the problem worse, and I want to admit it.
His 1994 crime bill, something that he now admits was a mistake.
There were longer sentences, and most of these people are in prison under state law, but the federal law set a trend, and that was overdone. We were wrong about that.
Well, I think it's important that President Clinton acknowledges that things didn't turn out exactly as he and all of us would have wished.
I'm happy that he realizes the error of his ways. I think he knew back then that it wasn't good policy, I'll be honest.
Back then, there was an outcry over the rising crime rate, and people from all communities
All right, so that was that. We're going to be talking about some of that stuff right there, and this was taken from the 13th on Netflix. So yeah, let's get her off of there. Not a big fan of her. So let's go ahead and watch the interview with Amy Povah. There we go. Hey. How are you?
Great. I'm fine, Sean. Thank you.
You're welcome. So this is the Nowhere to Go But Up podcast. I'm your host, Sean Dustin. Today I am talking with Amy Povah, and she is the founder of Can Do Justice Through Clemency. And Amy was a Clemency recipient as well in 2000 during the Clinton administration. Is that correct?
Yes, it is. Yes, I'm a Clinton era Clemency recipient.
That's awesome. So what, I had everything planned out, and that's funny. Sometimes you just gotta go with the flow of things when you're doing these things. Let's see. So when did you find yourself with Nowhere to Go But Up, and how did you get through it?
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on your platform. And I love the title of Nowhere to Go But Up, because it really does force somebody to pinpoint that time that they were at their lowest moment in life. And so I would have to say that was when I had chicken pox in the Waco County Jail. And I often say it doesn't get lower on the totem pole of life than being in it's the McLennan County Jail, but in Waco, Texas. And then to contract chicken pox, which for your listeners, where we were so desperate, so desperate in those type of conditions for nutrition that you tend to trade vegetables for other people may like the mystery meat. We called it mystery meat in there, which was, I'm not sure what it was. It was usually something that was cookie cutter to either look like a shape of a pork chop, but it would be breaded and something inside that looked more like gristle and an amalgamation of stuff pressed together. And I just couldn't eat it. So I would share watery turnip greens, or maybe there would be a sliver of a pear, canned pear. And I even remember the day that, normally you would try to trade with somebody you knew, and we had plastic spoons, and the trays were like high school with the little compartments. And, I would use my spoon to scrape the food onto my plate. And a lady used her spoon to give me the canned spinach or whatever it was, that was like a filet mignon or something. It was, just to get some canned spinach had at least some nutrition. And so I started getting these little itchy small blisters on me. And then in the middle of the night, I just broke out, and I didn't know what was going on, but I even had blisters in my throat. I thought I was dying. And when the guard came through, they count you every hour on the half hour to make sure nobody's tunneling to freedom. I made sure I was up at my door so that when she shined the flashlight in my room, I could be right there because I needed help. And I'll never forget, she was the nicest one. I think we called her Miss Sissy. And I scared her. I probably looked like a Halloween pumpkin. And she kind of jumped back and said that she would try to go get me help. But when she came back, she said, there's really nothing I can do. You'll have to wait until tomorrow to see a doctor. But she had notified everybody that it looked like I was, in dire straits. So I ended up in isolation with chicken pox, and they gave me drugs to keep me asleep so that I wouldn't be scratching these sores, as I call them. And Waco is not known to be the most fair jurisdiction. It's, in my view, very corrupt. It was a very corrupt jurisdiction, court, and the jailhouse was similar. So you're never supposed to allow a federal agent to have access to an inmate, ever. But I was in isolation. I had court-appointed attorney who, was akin to no attorney, or maybe worse. And the jailer one day popped my door open and allowed one of the agents on the task force to step into my cell. Of course, I don't think he wanted to get too close to me either, but he served me my forfeiture papers. So in addition to being indicted and looking at 20 to life and being dragged from Los Angeles to Texas on Con Air and being put in the Waco County Jail, and then getting chicken pox, I had my forfeiture papers served to me in a cell during that time, essentially saying that the government was going to seize all my property unless I put up a cost bond to fight the forfeitures, which you cannot do when you're in the county jail. They conveniently left out the part that if you don't have any money, they had already seized all my money, that you could file in form of pauperous. That's supposed to be in the forfeiture paperwork. And so I think that's when I had nowhere to go but up.
Yeah, that's I mean, I know your story a little bit from what I've read in the founder part of the Can Do Clemency website. But I also know that one of the causes and one of the reasons that caused you to do this was something that I witnessed when I was going through my federal deal, which wasn't anywhere close to what any of these other people were going for. But I witnessed it, and so I saw it for myself. The Ghost Oak conspiracy cases. People that are getting exorbitant amounts of time because they think they can fight it because there's no evidence, and you're taking the word of another criminal to hand out tons of time. I mean, it's laughable, but it's a tragedy. It's like how does that happen, and how does the public even I feel like it's that they don't know, but even if they did know, I mean, what are you going to do? There's a whole lot of other things that have to happen before any of that can happen. Well,
I blame our leaders in DC, and it's even pervasive at the state level. I'm sure you have probably seen Just Mercy by now, and the film with Brian Stevenson that was able to get the gentleman off of death row. And when you see, people think that if you're on death row, they had to have a body, they had to have the weapon, they had to have forensics. But no, quite often, just like in our drug cases, you are often in there on the testimony of a cooperating witness who often has, when you look into it, zero to no credibility. Well, it's even worse with the conspiracy law and the drug cases, because as you said, they don't have to even seize any drugs, hence the term ghost dope, which is something that surfaced after I got out of prison. I think it's an interesting term and very appropriate, but we don't even have exoneration through DNA, which at least some of the state cases, people are getting out, thank God, for DNA, but there's no relief for people who are serving 20 to life, even for pot, based on testimony alone. And I wish I could pinpoint that moment in history, in the timeline of our nation. I've asked many scholars, can't really seem to get a definitive, but for people my age, younger people, maybe even yourself might not remember this, but in the 80s, DeLorean, who made the DeLorean car, was arrested. He was caught with cocaine, and they tried to make a case against, was it John DeLorean? Anyway, it was thrown out for entrapment. And you used to have an entrapment defense. All of that is gone now. There's no such thing as an entrapment defense. They can entrap you all day long. But here was somebody who was actually caught with drugs. And during the Reagan-Bush administration, many laws were shoved through Congress willy-nilly, and the driving force was zero tolerance, tough on crime. That was fueling almost public hysteria, largely due to crack cocaine and just crack babies and the media jumping on without doing very much research. So there was a shift where it went from possibly DOJ getting frustrated that they couldn't make a case. If you ever look at the old movies, they have to set up, video and audio in a hotel room. They don't have to do any of that anymore. They really don't even have undercover agents very much anymore, because they realized if we catch somebody, we can just make them the cooperating witness. You don't get the benefit of a plea bargain unless you provide substantial assistance. If you look up the legal term, that means you have to help the government in the conviction of additional people. So you don't even get the benefit of a plea bargain unless you will help the government set up other people. And it's probably the majority of the people I met, women, were in there where there were no drugs seized. My ex-husband did manufacture and distribute a lot of MDMA, but there were no drugs seized. And I was just running around collecting bail money. We had been separated for a year. I thought that I believed him at first. I knew that they were, you can read the writing on the wall. They were in deep doo-doo, but I had no idea that by involving myself and going and visiting him, he was in Germany in prison, that would suck me into the conspiracy statute, which really, they poured kerosene on the drug war in the late 80s. And the conspiracy law is a big factor. Everybody I was serving time with is in there for conspiracy charges, just about. There's a few where it's possession with intent to distribute, but the vast majority of us are conspiracy cases.
Yeah, I was actually editing some footage or some audio today from a woman who's in Waco. She got 33 years, same thing. And, I'm just trying to put her story out there and see if, anybody can do anything for her. But I mean, it's horrible. She was in there, her mom, passed away at one point. And, what's really the things that it's low level drug offenders at most, or somebody who's maybe an addict, or the girlfriend or significant other of somebody who got in trouble, and it's just an assumption that you're a part of the whole thing, right? And so there's tons of victims of this. And I'm just, also while 2 weeks after we did the recording, apparently one of her sons got killed in a car accident. So I mean, it's like, on top of that,
What's her name?
Melissa Veach.
Okay, because we have people there that we're advocating for, and Clarissa Burgoon, anyway, yeah.
And this is
understand that when you're in prison, it's a long stretch.
Yeah.
And no one can understand what it's like to lose a family member. It's torture because we're not allowed. They deny us the right to go on a furlough anymore, go connect with our family, go to a funeral. it's awful.
Well, it's not only that, it's the amount of guilt that you're probably putting on yourself as well, because, you know, if you hadn't done whatever, you know, irregardless of the circumstances, you know, it's through no fault of your own, but you blame yourself. So, I mean, you've got that to deal with as well. So yeah, it's, you know, just to get back on to the conspiracy part of this is really why I wanted to get involved and start exposing some of these stories, because it's, you know, these people need help. They don't need to be caged up for years to help, you know, profit the prison system in Unicor, which I believe is a huge part of what the problem is, you know, that's a huge giant mechanism that needs to keep rolling, because that $1 an hour is cranking out, you know, 500 million per facility in the federal system. And, you know, the tragedy there is, instead of taking the money, the 44,000 a year, you know, whatever it costs to house somebody and feed them, I mean, you can just have Unicor turn around and do that whole thing and fund it itself, you know. But instead, they make this, you know, politics and corporations. You know, it's what we're seeing, the huge problem right now, and why we're about to run off the cliff again. You know, how many times has it happened in the last so many years? You know, when are the American people going to wake up and realize that, hey, man, you're being lied to? Stop listening to the mainstream media. Stop listening to that program. They call it programming for a reason. You're watching programming.
You're being programmed. You sure are. And if people have noticed, every station, you know, I don't care whether it's CNN, MSNBC, Fox, you name it, they only really focus on 3 subjects a day, and then every opinion program has people to come up to kind of haggle. It's not even news to me. I'm not getting any facts. Yeah, I can do that in my own living room. You put up somebody on the left, you put up someone on the right, and someone in the middle, and they all haggle. And it's I call it the flavor of the day. And no matter what station you go to, you know, there's a conservative view and a liberal view, but that's not even news. That's not what's going on in the nation, you know, as in even what we're talking about right now, where people are maybe being educated about the conspiracy law, or having somebody do a spotlight what's going on in our prison system, or whatever the particular issue you're interested in. But you touched on something that I must say, I had an epiphany. I could not figure out why the government just continued to pursue me, because after my ex-husband cooperated, it felt like, well, okay, now they'll leave me alone, because originally they wanted me to give information on him, and I really wasn't a part of his operation. And no, I mean, they just kept on, and they wanted me to cooperate, and I just wasn't willing. To me, it's akin to selling your soul. So after I received 24 years, and you're in this big fog, because back then, that was 89 when they first busted into my home. It took them 2 years to indict me. But so when I arrived at FCI Dublin, I went to orientation, and I'm still trying to figure out what just happened. What happened? And, you know, my parents, everybody, even people that my parents knew, a state trooper from Dallas, and he said, "Oh, don't worry, she's a first offender." He'd been through many, many cases and many trials at the state level, and he goes, "You know, she'll get probation only." That's what people used to get in the early 80s. People may remember it used to be called recreational drug use. George Bush Jr. used that term. That's a pretty benign term for drugs. Then all of a sudden it went from recreational drug use to 20 to life for anybody who was even associated with illicit drug behavior. So when I was in orientation, they had the head of every department of that prison come in to explain how food service worked, how education department, what was required of you, recreation. And then all of a sudden this guy came in, and you're kind of falling asleep because everything's very monotone. And then he was like, ladies. And, it was sort of shocking. And then he was just, all excited. And we have unicorn factories here, and I hope everybody will come and work. And we have a furniture factory and a cut and sew factory and automated data processing. Later, they had a phone center when people used to call 411 for a number. That was all prisoners who were taking those calls. And then he launched into, we're going to start you off at 23 cents an hour, as if that was good news or something to be excited about. And then he said, if you work real hard and you can, you'll go from I can't remember the entry level, there's a term for it. He said, you can work your way up to a little over $1 an hour if you're a good worker and produce well. And you'll even get, I think you even get maybe a little few days vacation because of the rules that govern that. And then he went on to say, we're a multi-million-dollar industry that is sold on Wall Street. You can go buy stock in Unicor. And I'm just in shock. I'm like, okay, now I get it. I mean, I really did have that moment like, oh, now I know why I'm here. At least, when something doesn't make sense, you just don't have the piece of the puzzle. It's hidden from view. So when you do have that epiphany, it's like, okay. And if you go back to the roots of Unicorn, if you go to their website, they make it sound like they're doing a great service to teach these low-level people, people who are assumed to have no education, a trade, so that when they get out, they can get a job. That may have been an original idea of, it's a win-win for everybody, but we're well past that. That is the light went on, and it was during the Bush-Reagan administration to pour kerosene on mass incarceration, and they knew exactly what they were doing. I mean, you don't go from a model where a first offender gets probation to a model where a first offender can get life on testimony alone. And the Bail Reform Act was passed where they wouldn't allow you to have bail, so you had to sit in a county jail. That incentivizes people to cooperate. All these blackmail tools came in, mandatory minimums, the conspiracy law, where you will either work with us or else. So, closed the door so that people weren't leaving, and bus loads were coming in, and it just happened to be after the end of the Cold War. So a lot of military bases were conveniently converted to prisons, federal prisons.
Oh yeah, Taft is one of them, right?
Yeah. No, I didn't work at Unicor. Fortunately, I had one asset that the feds didn't seize that was able to support me, but I was just hanging on by the thread my last few years because that asset was sold and there was no more funds for it. And somebody snuck out a piece of paper on future Unicor factories, and we were still in the 90s, and it went clear into 2000, and it showed all of the federal prisons that were going to be built. A few of them were military bases, and out beside the prison, it already had the Unicor factory and what would be produced there. So when you project, they were projecting probably about 15 years down the road. They had no interest in, there's no exit strategy for the drug war. There's no interest in even removing drugs from the street, because if you were out to win the drug war, if that was your goal, you wouldn't be planning on opening prisons 15 years in advance, in addition to the prisons we already have in this country. This was very intended, and it's something that I agree with you. I just think that the general public just is completely asleep. There's not enough. We're all in our little I call it the echo chamber, because we're woke, as they say, but how do you penetrate that bubble? I think everyone needs to talk to their neighbors, their family members, and I have done that, and everyone is shocked. I even say, I'm so tired of getting the slack jaw because people aren't aware of the conspiracy law, they're not aware of the slave labor trade, but everyone should be.
Yeah, it's I blame it on the media. The media does a great job in confusing everybody, and then also the misdirection that the government plays, you know, with each other, all the theater that goes on to keep real issues from coming out. You know, oh well, let's confuse them over here. We'll put something on over here while we're doing some bipartisan stuff that's detrimental for everybody over here. You know, because it's really two heads of the same snake at the end of the day. They both work together. It's all theater. You know, they, like you said, it was 20, 15, 20 years out. Their timelines are in 25, 50 in large increments where most people can barely even schedule out a day or a week at the most, you know what I mean? And so it's you know, that combined with the fact that we think that most people are inherently good, right? You know, you give people the benefit of the doubt that I would say 90% of the population are just good people that want to, you know, have a decent life and, you know, kids and you know, feel loved and all these other things that are pretty much the same to everybody. We all have those emotions. At the biological level, we all work the same way. You know, so it's just that 10%, and then you got the one, and then the half that's above the one that, you know, keep everything from flowing. And, you know, I was saying this the other day that, you know, I get it, the whole Black Lives Matter and everything else. And sometimes they would say, you know, no lives can matter until Black Lives Matter. Well, none of this silly ass stuff, and I'm sorry, but I don't think it's about racism at all. No, I get the systematic stuff that's happened, and the 13th on Netflix really points out how that makes the connection. And Bill Clinton himself even says in that documentary that I got it wrong. You know, I don't know if he really meant that. And it's like, and what can you do? Okay, great, you got it wrong. But what does it mean for anybody else that's still stuck in because of what you got wrong? You know, and I don't know where I was going with that. I just kind of
Matter movement.
Oh yeah. Well, none of these other what I call are symptoms of the bigger problem, which is corruption at the federal level and the corporate level. And there's a documentary that's coming out that I just Patrick Lovell, who is the producer, I just had him on yesterday, and I'll be and I would actually scream this whole thing about the 2008 financial crisis, and, you know, everything that The Big Short and anything else that had to do with it. This thing just lays it all out there for you. And, you know, from the whistleblowers to the federal prosecutors that were shut down and not allowed to prosecute. You know, I mean, this thing, it just really lays out how corrupt the system really is. And, you know, and we can't do anything until you kill the corruption. You know, you gotta start where the problem lies, and that's right where it lies. All this other stuff is just nothing but a manifestation of all that, you know, symptoms.
You know, when you have video of a police officer choking out an African American, and he's so comfortable doing it, while you can tell somebody is standing there filming you, we do have an insane problem in this country that wakes up almost on a cellular level the frustration, anger, sadness, suffering of a group of people who have, whether it's community-based, ancestors, your own family tree that is well rooted within your own, you know, DNA. It triggered what we're still seeing, and not only do our law enforcement officers need to be retrained from day one, possibly even many of them need to be cycled out, because I'm not so sure you can retrain some people at this stage. But another thing that has not been, I don't think it's received enough attention, is our prosecutors have got to be completely retrained, DOJ from the bottom up. These are people who are extremely vindictive. They, if you don't cooperate with them, you got nothing coming. Even in the movie Just Mercy and all of these movies where DNA or something can exonerate them, the prosecutors aren't seeking justice. That word means nothing to them. They just continue to argue and litigate to keep the person in prison as if it's all ego-based and they can't accept what they consider to be a loss. It's the same at the federal level, where we have people getting out on compassionate releases. Chad Marks is going through this right now. Daniel Brown got out and his prosecutor threatened to appeal and was going to. Chad still is. This is well-rooted legislation that says a judge can release somebody on compassionate release. Why are these prosecutors, during a pandemic, and a pandemic that has positive cases running rampant in the very prison where they're trying to put somebody back in, why can't they just say, okay, great, he's already served 10, 15 years, the legislation came down the pike. No, they won't let go. When we had the Clemency Project 2014 under the Obama administration, some of the best people were denied. A lot of the people who are still on my website, like Michael Peltier, he's a paraplegic serving life for pot. And he's still pending, but a lot of people know Alice Marie Johnson's case. She was denied. She was a perfect candidate, and we tried to ring the bell with the Obama administration that DOJ was corrupting the process. They were sabotaging it, and that was in large part due to the fact that DOJ has a last say as to which clemency petitions travel over to the White House. OPA surrenders to DOJ. DOJ asks their prosecutors, and if the prosecutor is still carrying a grudge that you wouldn't cooperate, which I think the majority of them do, you ain't got nothing coming. So there's so much that's wrong with the current system and so much work to be done. And we make these little teeny weeny incremental steps where we can get a few people out, like we're doing with the 101 crack cocaine ratio. Why did that take so long? It's the same as powder cocaine. The chemical is, but we're only now through First Step Act, we're able to get some, not even all, some people from the 100-to-1 ratio down to the 18 ratio. But there were all these conditions. It had to be a certain quantity, if it was a larger quantity, and we still have people who are fighting that battle. Sherman Moore has his case in, but he should be out, that are still sentenced under the old 100-to-1 crack. How is that not racist? And how is it that people have to file a motion? Just go in and look at all the crack cocaine cases. They've served X amount of time, do the ratio 1-to-1 like it should have always been, and release them. They've suffered enough. I mean, this is, unless somebody has done something particularly heinous in prison, like murdering somebody, and then who knows whether it's self-defense, that person is already given their 10 pounds of flesh under an old regime that we now recognize as racist. But our politicians in DC, many of which agree that the train went off the tracks, what are you doing about it? They're not doing anything about it. And if anything, we are in a social media blitz today because the Senate stimulus package bill has nothing in it, zero for prisoners. And there's several bills, the Durbin-Grassley bill, there's several bills that could have been folded into it that collapses the 30-day time frame to get a compassionate release. You have to ask the warden and then wait 30 days until you can put it before your judge. These are simple little asks, and some funding to help organizations like ours and others to file compassionate releases for people. They're all waiting. And we've got Carswell, a women's facility where that Circle High Bear Woman died who gave birth and died from COVID. And I have friends, Nancy Furneaux is out, she got a compassionate release, but many of her friends in there have been diagnosed with COVID. Coleman is on fire. We've got lots of our women, Laz Ordaz, Adrienne Miller, Shalana McFarland got out because she had asthma, and Shanita McKnight got out because she had lupus, but now now that there's positive cases there, they're doing nothing. They're not releasing those women. Rufus Rochelle is somebody that I admire and was in the men's facility at Coleman. He's on home confinement, but these people are going to go back. They're on an ankle monitor, and they're going to go back after this.
Yeah, that was what my question was, because I'd heard about that, and that comes up in one of the groups that I'm a part of, and we're talking about our own, how we can help spread the word. It's other podcasters, and I believe, and Holly said hello, Amy Lulu.
Hi, Holly. I love Holly. She's one of the major freedom fighters.
Yeah, she's great. I loved having her on my show. Also, there's Lisa Riley and Miranda. I don't remember what her last name is, but they do the hashtag life after felony, which is basically the same thing, that kind of what I do, except a little bit more. They go and talk to people that are still in and try to get their stories heard. And I think it really is just going to take a culmination of everybody. I just did the articles of incorporation to start my own nonprofit for ex-offenders coming out coming out and being able to adapt, because you don't get any skills while you're in there. I mean, you might get some, like James Jones, he got some skills in Unicor. You do get some if you go to Unicor, but the skills that you need when you've been down for a while, even for 3 years for me, it was, you suffer PTSD, doesn't matter, you're going to. Whatever kind of violence that you were exposed to, and they're all different. Some places aren't as bad as others, but I mean, it took me a while to decompress when I got out, and then to be able to take that mind frame and those behaviors that you learn in criminality that don't transfer into regular society. You got to rebuild yourself and reinvent who you are, and shed that old part of you that doesn't work in the functioning world. Unfortunately, you can't cast conformity anymore. Like I'm not a conformist at all, but sometimes you have to bend a little bit just to you surrender to win. That's a saying that comes to mind when I think about that. So how many people have you helped come home since you've started your nonprofit?
I don't keep score, but I think on our Now Free page, I don't know, maybe 50, 60, 70, I don't know. Some people come home as a direct, due to a direct action that we've taken. We don't write that many clemency petitions, but what we do is some people, there's a download on Office of the Pardon Attorney website. That's just it's not adequate. I don't know why they don't flesh that thing out, because there's no place on that form to put a release. They don't ask for a release plan. When it's at the Office of the Pardon Attorney, the Office of the Pardon Attorney will reach out to the case manager for a progress report. But and now, because we are working on submitting some cases without necessarily going through OPA, we kind of do the work that they would do. Like we get a progress report, we do a cover page, a table of contents, we do a little bio, so you get a snapshot view of who is this person, where they were born, what their family life was like. Because we've had women who were victims of incest or a horrible home environment, or like me, I had an idyllic home environment. I grew up in a wonderful household with 2 loving parents. So who is this person? And we always put a picture I think pictures for me, I'm able to connect with an image as to just black and white words on a page. And then later you read so many cases, you can't even remember, was that this, it all bleeds together. So we help build out the clemency petition before we're comfortable sending it over. And frankly, it's a lot of work, but we also get media exposure for a lot of the people that are on our website. So I don't like to say, because I don't want to imply that we freed that many people, but we push them out on social media. A lot of the other organizations, after we push them out on social media, will notice them and want to partner or assist, and all ships rise with the tide. And but we have had some that due to a direct action that we took, we got a bird's eye view on one in particular. Neil Eggleston was White House counsel for President Obama, and he read an article in Fusion about Ramona Brandt that Casey Tullen did a great job talking about she was a domestic abuse victim, and the case was horrible. And after they read it, he went up to her. I was standing there. We were in DC, and congratulated her and said, I read that article in Fusion, and it seemed to have really had an impact on him. And they may have asked for her case. I mean, that sort of was implied. Yeah. So it's a daunting task to find the people too, because I have boxes and boxes and boxes of mail that we haven't even been able to respond to, because we're not a funded organization. We have volunteers. I don't take a salary. We have enough money to exist, to pay for travel expenses and some costs with copy fees and all of that. But there's so many people who need help, and so few people who have the time to devote when you don't even know, like, at least the Obama administration said there was a clemency project. So a lot of organizations were willing to pour their resources into that. But when you don't know, it's hard to allocate resources to help people. So I've got boxes and boxes of boxes. It's so sad because I like referrals. Most of the people on my website came to me because we have Malik King is a wonderful guy who is our prison outreach coordinator. He communicates to a lot of the prisoners. So do I. Our guardian angel, led by Maureen Brisset, Betty Herman Davis, Jody, Enrica Caldwell is my vice president. She has a fiance in prison at Loretto, which has COVID cases right now. Mm-hmm. And we'd like to get cases that are recommended to us by someone who's in prison, because one thing I notice is when you're in prison, you see who's still up to the hijinks and the, I'm not saying everyone is deserving of help, but there's always that person like Josephine Ledesma and Danielle Metz that I did time with, who were serving life, two of the most beautiful people I've ever known, and I'm still friends with them. And Josephine comes to mind in particular because she was very introverted. A lot of the Hispanic women, some of them can't speak English. Who's going to help them? Alyssa Castillo is out now. She got compassionate release, but she could hardly even communicate with me because she, Laz Ordaz is in there, and she's Cuban, and she can write, and you can understand what she's saying. But these are all people who need assistance. So we try to identify. Then you have to vet. Then, you pour your heart and soul into it. And then you wait and wait and wait and wait. What is taking so long to get some of these people some relief? I mean, we need Trump to step up and do some clemencies. I don't care who's in the Oval Office. I know a lot of people don't like Trump. I'm going to work with whoever's in the Oval Office and has the pen, because I'm concerned about Michelle West, who's serving her whole life, was 50. And the guy, there was a murder in the case, but he never served a day and testified against her. And that's what we opened this up with, was you talking about dose dope and people getting the word of a criminal. Her case, Michelle West's case, one of the most heinous cases. That's why I have her number one at the top 25 women deserving clemency. Alice used to be there. Now Michelle is. Because why is a murder, people don't even know, there's a murderer next door who never served a day. You know, there's a lot of people who come in and say, oh, Amy, murderers deserve. I'm not saying they don't, but this man never served a day. And, you know, would you rather have somebody next door who wasn't willing to cooperate? I'm concerned that we reward people who are able to escape their own punishment if they will put somebody else in prison. That is a broken system. That's a frightening system. European countries, when they find, you know, sometimes will interact and they're shocked that that's the level of evidence necessary to win a conviction in this country.
Well, it's not by accident, I'll tell you that much.
No, it's not.
I mean, everything that you know, I'm coming to find out and starting to see and realizing that, like, the people that the social engineers, the people that design all of these systems and everything else, they knew what they were doing. And it's like, you know, it's one connects to another, which connects to another, which connects to another, and it's like it's just like a what do they call those at the fair, like the mirrors, all the mirrors. You know what I mean? It's like they all lead to something nefarious when you really get to the bottom of it.
It's been a rude awakening. It's like you're young and fair, you know, free, but you finally bust through. You know, Crystal Munoz was serving 20 years for pot. She's out now, Tynese Hall, Judith Negron, and you bust out, and then you have this moment where everybody is celebratory and you're so happy. And yes, of course we love being in our own bed, and of course we love eating whatever we want. And you can't get out of your mind the people that you left in there, that you were close with and that you care for. And, you know, they're left in, so you don't even have the peace of mind that you were hoping that when you finally got through your own personal nightmare, it's all, you can't, we're not a computer that we can go in and delete. We're trapped inside a nightmare box that I don't know that we'll ever be able to purge it, because it's not just the people that are still in there, it's what you experienced. The PTSD, like you said. I only, and I don't want to jinx it, in the last few years have stopped having nightmares. I mean, I literally would wake up in a sweat because I couldn't get a washing machine, because that was such an issue while in prison, trying to get on a list to get a washing machine and having to run across the unit when they said clear, count was clear, early in the morning. And fighting to get in line before the list was filled up. I mean, I had a dream that I was getting out, and I stepped across the line, because they literally had lines in there when you got close to the unit, and if you were across the line, you were out of bounds. And they said, oh, you know, your foot just stepped on that line, you got to start your time over again. And I just remember screaming and crying, and they said, no, you've got to start your time all over again. I mean, it's tragic. I'm sort of laughing and crying at the same time, but those are the dreams that I have had, being set up. A lot of us were set up when we felt the betrayal of somebody who cooperated against us or fingered us to escape their own suffering. You know, I had a dream that my ex-husband walked up in an airport, and then he set something down, and I was like, that was weird, and it had drugs in it. You can't get this out of your system. We've been traumatized.
Yeah, no, you're right. And, you know, for men, it's the same thing. You know, you've experienced whatever violence that you had to while you were in there, you know, for whatever you may have done or had to do or saw. I mean, there's some pretty bad things that I saw while I was there. Not nearly as bad as some other people that I've heard, but it doesn't matter. It affects you, you know. And it's not normal, and it's not, and it shouldn't. It should never be viewed as something that should be normal.
Right.
you know. That doesn't work. We should know that by now, just by looking at the other, like, who is it, Portugal? Their model for criminal justice. I mean, you know, there's tons of places that are doing things that are working, and the numbers and the data back it up. But you know, we live in this this big money, this machine that just needs to keep churning people and you know, taking everything out in its wake. So yeah, well, I mean, you know, at least there's people like you and I that are out here. You know, you're doing way more than I am, but I'm just a baby in this little space and starting to find my my voice and where I fit in here and how I can help.
This is perfect, because I've had so many people say, why don't you do your own podcast or your own, you know, Facebook? And frankly, we need people like you and others that you can carve out that lane. Have someone like myself and other leads, Holly, come on. There's lots of family members who need an opportunity to talk about their loved one inside. We can certainly set up some of those for you. And I don't want to overlap what other people are doing just so I can put can do at the top. In fact, we're very much devoted to kind of sticking to our lane and communicating one-on-one with prisoners, because that's a labor-intensive thing that I don't think a lot of the other organizations, you know, want to hire somebody to do that. So we're happy to you know, to share those stories and plug people in where we can. But we need people like you who can have me on to talk and free me to just stay focused on what I'm focused on. But we have, you know, it's so hard to open core links right now. I almost have to have a stiff drink before I open core links to communicate with the prisoners that are waiting. And I've got 2 compassionate releases right now that are on my computer that I've got to go to, and we got help. Colin Miller is the associate dean and law professor at University of South Carolina. He's helped with a few. I got a phone call today where somebody's possibly going to give us some resources and access to a couple of law firms, but it can't come fast enough.
Yeah.
So, you know, I'm busy. So thank you for doing what you do, because there's plenty of people who need a platform like yours so they can talk about their loved one, or people who've come out. We've got a lot of people who've come out who can talk about Coleman, what's going on there, Carswell. Nancy Furneaux served 16 years at Carswell, and it's on fire with COVID, and lots of her friends have been diagnosed as positive. So there's, we need people like you giving us a platform. So thank you.
Yeah, just let me know, man. Anytime you have somebody that you know, that's gotten out and wants to tell their stories, you know, even to guys that, you know, are trying that inside and, you know, want to call. I'm on Core Links as well, and so yeah, I mean, anything. And if I can't do it, I've got a buddy, Joe Martinez. He has a podcast called Talk from the Cell Block, and same thing. He can help. You know, Lisa and Miranda, who are big fans of yours. They have a leg of this too. So I mean, you know, we all need to start coming together instead of like trying to do everything all alone. Right. Start taking help or linking up with other organizations and you know, figuring out how you can work together and you know,
all ships rise with the tide.
Yeah.
And we really have to be shoulder to shoulder. And, you know, not everybody agrees, but it would be nice when people don't agree, or if one little bitty wrinkle, we would understand that there's different kinds of personalities, there's different ways of communicating, and understand that we're all doing God's work. All of us that are in this and trying to bring people home, we shouldn't be haggling with one another or feeling some kind of like territorial way, and just lift up everyone and, like you said, just work together, because we're up against a hydra-headed monster. Yeah. That monster always seems to have plenty of resources to crush and silence our voices. I just was quoted in the Washington Examiner because, and I like the reporter, but they wanted to know whether we'd seen an uptick in crime with the releases due to COVID. And not only have I not seen an uptick, I mean, it's, we need more people out. And it was released today, and it said, I think the title is Murders Surge from Convicts, early, that have gotten out. I can't remember. It was so awful. Then when you read the article doesn't say anything like that. It doesn't support the title. And she was upset. The reporter was upset and said they changed her title. Her editor said someone above him. But I told her, I said, this is a fraudulent title. I'm not going to share it. And will they please change it? Because you can change a title even after it's been published. So that's that hydra-headed monster that we're just, trying every little thing we can to get the word out. The last thing we need is to be set up in an article that's sending the opposite message. And again, if you read, nearly everybody quoted says that crime is not up. I mean, let's forget about what they consider going on with the protests. There's nothing tying people who have been released early due to COVID to a surge in murders. There's always going to be that one strange case, and it was a guy who was a minute from getting out anyway, and that's horrible. I would never try to understand how a family felt that lost somebody due to somebody who was released early. But the only murder that I'm aware of is somebody who was scheduled to get out. I think he was even supposed to get out on bail. It may have been a pretrial thing. And they were releasing some people out of, jail conditions. Sorry, I don't even really know the details that well, but somebody passed that information on to me, so I could be incorrect. But that was somebody who was probably going, people get out of prison every day because they finish their sentence. Yeah. Are we responsible for them too? I mean, they have to release people, and there's some people who get out and they're incorrigible and they go commit another crime. But we can't keep them in prison longer than their sentence. But we don't get headlines that, 16,000 people got out of prison today because their prison sentence ended. No. When I was in prison, there was an action Janet Reno was taking to try to get some of us first offenders some relief. And then an article came out, I think in the New York Times, it said 16,000 prisoners may walk out of prison as a scare tactic. Mm-hmm. How many walk out every day nationwide? You don't put that up in headlines. So we're being manipulated, as you say, by the media, and depending on whose agenda is being driven. And it's time. It's time.
Part of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but a huge part of the problem is, look, the federal government, the CIA, whoever it is you wanted to point the finger at, I mean, they're all complicit in it. They started this problem, and then they created the solution for it that made a bunch of people millions of dollars, the billionaire class. I mean, come on, man. And then we, people that have been there and experienced it ourselves and know that there's no help and there's no relief for anybody that's coming home. And if you don't have money while you're in there, you're really screwed, because nobody's gonna help you unless you find a jailhouse lawyer that's, you can buddy up to, that will either show you how to do it or take pity on you and help you out. And that's horrible.
Jailhouse lawyer, because I don't know if you know, but I was in the law library, and not everybody, some people just want commissary. So smarter in there. And we knew who was not conversant at all. And you would and you can't say anything because you don't want to get a black eye behind it, but you just had to sit there and go, oh my God, so-and-so just, team. So you say, and some people don't know. I mean, there's a lot of people who just don't know better. They don't, so they just assume that if someone says, "Oh, I'll help you, I know what I'm doing," that they can rely on that person. But
that's where Holly comes in. Because if you know that you're going to go to prison, hire Holly Houghton, who's a prison consultant. She'll steer you right.
Yeah. I want to touch on that, what you said with the CIA, because I was obsessed with collecting every article. I just wanted to understand, how did this happen? How did we get here? And, Gary, what was Gary's last name that worked for the San Jose Mercury News that broke the story?
Oh, yeah, Gary. I can't remember what his name is. Let me see if I can look it up.
I love that. And I walked around the compound with that article. Everybody would give me articles, anything drug war related. And I don't know if people have had an opportunity. The History Channel did a 3-series episode on the history of the drug war, basically starting with the 80s. And in that, they confirmed everything that I had collected and studied and thought, because I just see one person's face in particular on my dartboard, and it's George Bush Sr., because they said, while with the Reagan-Bush administration, that he was sort of over the drug war. He was kind of the architect, and that's what the History Channel said, and it's pretty well documented. And I've said then, and I'll say, I still say, we should never allow anybody in the White House, vice president or later, he was president, who was head of the CIA, because he brought the CIA's Pandora's box of tactics, I feel, other people may feel differently, to the drug war, which was CIA assets. They call them assets now. They're called drug informants. But that whole shift and the CIA worked with cartels. I mean, Noriega, it's pretty well documented that Noriega was a CIA asset until Bush became president, and that was the first thing he did. He went after Noriega and had him arrested. But, Panama was laundering a lot of money. You're telling me the U.S. didn't know about that and didn't condone it? I mean, there was just heinous things going on, including the whole Iran-Contra scandal. But I think it's troubling that nearly every current policy that we have right now is a kind of a hammer approach to American citizens, that our birthright is a right to a trial. And because of all of the laws that were put into place under the Reagan-Bush administration, we lost that constitutional right. It's gone. And I don't know why or how. I know the Sentencing Commission, I understand the sentencing guideline was put into place, but we got to get back to basics where we can get our constitutional rights back. Nobody should be punished for taking their case to trial.
Yeah, well, then that's where we come in, because we need to be bombarding the public the same way that the mainstream media bombards them to get their information out in the way that they want people to go. So it's just going to take linking up, and you send me people that you want their story to be heard, and if I can't do it, like I said, I'll direct them to some place they can, and eventually I'll get them. They'll make their way back around, because just because you're on one talking about one thing doesn't matter. You can make the whole circuit.
Right.
Let everybody hear you.
Yeah, right, exactly. It's a broad. There's so many topics associated with this, like Unicor and ghost dope and furloughs that are no longer allowed if you want to attend a funeral. There's a lot of emotion of the children that were ripped away, like Crystal Munoz. She was shackled while in labor, and the Dignity Act for women, fortunately, has been passed, and First Step Act no longer allows women being shackled while giving birth. But we can have women come on and talk about that experience, and getting hygiene products for free, finally, for women. Why should women have to be penalized just because they have a menstrual cycle and we had to buy, tampons at 7-Eleven prices? The phone time in there, it's all everything is profit driven now. Everything. You have to pay $1, some places $2 just to see the doctor. So that's a deterrent. If you're having migraines, it could be a brain tumor or something. And half the time when you go talk to them, they'll just say, oh, well, go buy some aspirin on commissary. But we should be able to have access. We never used to have to pay $1 or $2 even to just see. It's not even a doctor. They're I don't know what they have very few doctors in there.
Well, they should have employer contributed health care, right? You're working for Unicor, they might as well, if you got a job in Unicor, now you got insurance. You shouldn't have to pay for your stuff.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of things that need to be looked at and taken care of. We're at about an hour right now, so I mean, anything you want to plug or where people can find you, where they can donate, all this stuff will be available too in the show notes when the actual podcast goes out, aside from on the platforms like iTunes and Spotify and all those places.
Well, like everybody, I know everybody's coins are precious right now, especially during the pandemic. We could certainly use, I don't care whether it's a $20, $100, or if there just happens to be somebody who's mega rich watching, we would welcome funds. Even I would love a good grant writer. We have enough that, maybe we can sometimes grant writers do it for a percentage of the grant, but we would like to team up with grant writers. So sometimes people have talents that they can volunteer, or we're willing to pay. We have a very small budget, but some people want to communicate with prisoners. We have a guardian angel program. Some people may have extra clothes. We have people coming out of prison that we could connect somebody who came out of prison with somebody who wants to send them a box of clothes. Or maybe if people want to just give and know they're giving directly to somebody who is needy, we'll remove ourselves. Don't give to us. Crystal Munoz has a GoFundMe. A lot of people are home and they're happy, but they can't get a job. We're in a pandemic. There's a lot of people who are unemployed right now. So, people can reach out. The website has a way, Can Do Foundation, candoclemency.com has a way to send an email to us, I'd prefer less phone calls because I'm getting phone calls all the time from people who have somebody in prison. I just don't have time. I can't get my work done. I need to delegate those phone calls and switch them over to somebody else. But I just want to thank you for having me on, and I appreciate what you're doing.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing as well. And this won't be the last time we're talking. I hope from now on we're going to be working with each other, passing each other people to spread messages to. And yeah, you're right. It just, if you have a talent out there that that will fit in somewhere in this space, reach out. Because I mean, it may, especially like for me, I mean, it may be on a voluntary basis to begin with, but once the nonprofit comes through and grants to start, it's not as easy as just that. It's difficult to raise funds for that, but I mean, if everybody has the same kind of vision and they're driven to succeed in that way, and it's a pure endeavor that you're on. I mean, I don't see any reason why it can't be done.
Right. Yeah.
All right, Amy. Thank you. I appreciate it, and I'll be in touch through email.
Okay. Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.